The rhythm of Terra's bureaucracy is as steady and inevitable as the planet's own orbit. Yet this certainty is purchased at a cost far greater than simple freedom. The citizens of Terra live and die without ever knowing true surprise, authentic spontaneity, or the terrible, wonderful burden of genuine choice. Their days unfold along paths laid down by their great-great-grandparents. Careers follow trajectories predicted by aptitude tests administered in childhood, and their deaths occur at statistically predictable intervals, neatly factored into resource allocation charts. In this way, they achieve a twisted form of immortality. Their lives are so predictable that their individuality ceases to matter. Each person becomes a replaceable component in a machine so vast and intricate that the mortality of any single part is irrelevant. Yet beneath even these ordered realms lies another Terra entirely, a shadow world buried deep in the planet's ancient foundations. In sump levels, derelict sub-habs, and abandoned industrial complexes, humanity clings to existence among the archaeological layers of bygone ages. Here dwell those for whom even the grim stability of the middle hive is an unattainable luxury. These are the forgotten citizens of Terra. They are the descendants of the workers who once built the monumental structures above. They inherit genetic modifications whose original purpose has long since been lost. They maintain technologies that still function, but are no longer truly understood by any living human. Down in these depths, where the recycled air tastes faintly of rust and ancient plastics, where light comes only from bioluminescent cultures evolved over centuries to digest human waste, and where the drone and thrum of atmosphere processors create a constant metallic breathing that serves as the world's heartbeat, humanity continues in distorted forms barely recognizable to those above. These deep dwellers have adapted with the same ruthless efficiency that defines all life on Terra. Their societies have evolved unique social structures, religions, and survival strategies over 10 millennia in the dark. They worship the Emperor through rituals that predate the formal imperial cult, preserving shrines assembled from salvaged components of once mighty machines that helped conquer the galaxy. Their prayers, whispered in dialects so divergent from High or Low Gothic that they require ecclesi-linguists to translate, rise through the ventilation shafts and recycling systems to join the vast ocean of human devotion surrounding the Golden Throne. Their faith, tested by conditions that would shatter the spirits of citizens on more comfortable worlds, burns with an intensity that makes the measured, polite devotions of the upper hive nobility seem hollow. Yet they too support the great work of keeping Terra alive. In the deepest industrial complexes, where the line between flesh and machine has long since blurred, they tend systems that process the raw materials of existence. They oversee recycling engines that transform the waste of 1 trillion souls back into the basic components of life, maintaining cycles of renewal that have continued unbroken since the first walls of the Imperial Palace were raised. Their labor, performed in chambers so deep that the pressure of the planet above would crush an unprotected body, forms the foundation upon which all other life on Terra rests. The planetary ecosystem, such as it is, exists entirely as an artifact of human engineering. Natural weather has been replaced by atmospheric management systems that regulate temperature, humidity, and air composition according to schedules based on the respiratory needs of specific population demographics in specific Habe blocks. Rain, when it falls, is the result of deliberate cloud seeding operations, calibrated to deliver exactly the amount of moisture required for optimal industrial efficiency. Seasons do not follow celestial mechanics, but administrative decree, their timing adjusted to maximize productivity during key bureaucratic cycles. This artificial environment has given rise to its own harsh, mathematical forms of beauty. The great atmospheric processes, visible from the highest spires as vast pillars of engineered cloud stretching from horizon to horizon, generate weather patterns of such complexity and precision that their study has become a specialized discipline within the Adeptus Mechanicus. The interaction of carefully tuned atmospheric compositions with colossal arrays of artificial lighting produces dawns and sunsets that follow no natural order, yet reach such haunting grandeur that their contemplation has become a form of prayer among upper hive nobles. The rhythms of life on Terra no longer obey the planet's rotation or any natural calendar. Instead, they mirror the immense administrative cycles that govern imperial bureaucracy. The Terran year is divided not into months, but into processing periods, each dedicated to particular categories of bureaucratic work. The first processing period, lasting roughly 2 standard months, is devoted to receiving and initially cataloging reports from the segmentum commands. The second is consumed by cross-referencing those reports with existing archives, a task requiring millions of scribes working in unbroken shifts. The third is dedicated to the preparation of summary documents, as the fourth, to their review by appropriate authorities. The fifth, to the drafting of response orders, and so on, through a cycle refined over millennia for maximum efficiency in handling galactic-scale information. During each period, the entire population subtly adjusts itself to support the dominant administrative task. Food rations shift in composition to better fuel the mental exertions required by different forms of clerical work. Public lighting changes in wavelength and intensity according to studies on productivity optimization. Even the temperature and humidity within HAB blocks are adjusted to maintain ideal conditions for the millions of scribes, clerks, and administrators whose coordinated labor keeps the Imperium functioning. This coordination goes beyond mere management of resources and reaches into human psychology itself. Over 10,000 years of selective pressures, the people of Terra have been molded into a subspecies of humanity optimized for bureaucratic efficiency. Their attention spans, memories, and emotional responses have been shaped by generations of life in an environment where accurate, distraction-free information processing is the difference between survival and elimination. To citizens of other worlds, their focus and dedication appear superhuman. Yet these traits are not the product of genecraft or bionic augmentation, but of relentless environmental necessity. The social structures born of this pressure reflect humanity's adaptation to life as components of a colossal administrative engine. Families form not around affection or simple economic convenience, but around complementary bureaucratic skill sets that enhance household productivity. Marriages are contracted by administratum efficiency consultants, who analyze psychological profiles to assemble pairings calculated to produce the most effective workers. Children are schooled not according to personal interests or innate talents, but in accordance with projections of future bureaucratic needs, computed decades ahead by analytical engines whose complexity rivals the cogitators that plot starship courses through the warp. Yet even within this utilitarian framework, love, art, and individual expression persist, reshaped but not extinguished. Terran poetry, composed in the brief snatches of time between grueling shifts, is forced into extraordinary compression. Every word must hold multiple layers of meaning, since no one has the leisure to indulge in excess. The result is a form of verse so dense and potent that a single stanza can bear the emotional weight of an epic from a less burdened age. Music on Terra serves both beauty and function. The great choirs of the administrative cathedrals sing in mathematically optimized harmonies, designed to enhance mental clarity and reduce stress for the workers below. Trained from childhood to produce precise tonal qualities, these singers create soundscapes that transmute the grinding rhythm of bureaucratic labor into something approaching the sacred. Under their voices, the most mundane tasks of data entry and file maintenance become quasi-religious rites, transforming the act of administration itself into a form of worship. The visual art have also been reshaped by Terran conditions. Painters work with pigments extracted from atmospheric filtration systems and industrial recycling streams. Their colors contain literal fragments of the environment that sustains them, chemical residues, particulate histories of smog and industry. These works are at once devotional images and archives, encoding information about air composition, industrial output, and population density within their very substance. To the trained eye, a painting on Terra is as much a data record as an aesthetic object. Architecture on Terra is the ultimate expression of human adaptation to impossible circumstances. The vast hab blocks that shelter the populace are not mere buildings but self-contained ecosystems, engineered to support human life at population densities that press against theoretical limits. Each monolithic structure houses its own atmosphere processes, waste recycling plants, nutrient production systems, and transport networks. They are designed to survive complete isolation from the wider planetary infrastructure, sustaining their inhabitants as closed systems for indefinite periods. At the same time, these edifices stand as monuments to human endurance and creativity. Their construction demanded engineering solutions no prior civilization had ever attempted, solving problems of scale and stress beyond the experience of any earlier age. The colossal spires rising from Terra's scarred surface toward the artificial sky dwarf the pyramids of ancient Terra, the orbital elevators of the dark age of technology, and even many of the fortifications surrounding the imperial palace. They embody mankind's refusal to surrender to mathematical impossibility, its determination to sustain 1 trillion souls on a single world. The everyday routine of a Terran citizen reflects the complete integration of individual life with the planet's needs. They wake to the low thunder of atmosphere processors shifting into the morning cycle, a deep, steady breathing that passes for the world's heartbeat. Their first action is to check air quality readouts to determine what level of respiratory protection that day's work will require. They consume their morning ration, its ingredients precisely tuned to their metabolic profile and projected caloric expenditure, while listening to devotional broadcasts that blend spiritual instruction with practical information on atmospheric conditions, transport schedules, and current bureaucratic priorities. Their journey to work takes place via transport systems that are marvels of logistics. Great pneumatic tube networks and vertical transit lines move citizens between levels with such precision that millions arrive at their stations within minutes of their scheduled time. Tech priests tend these systems as if conducting liturgies, treating maintenance rituals as acts of worship. The result is a transport efficiency that approaches mechanical perfection, moving human cargo through the stacked strata of the hive world with the regularity of orbital motion. At their workstations, Terran citizens contribute to a computational and administrative web that spans the galaxy. A single clock, processing requisitions for ammunition to some forgotten frontier world, influences outcomes of battles fought light years away. Their precision in transcribing supply codes decides whether guard regiments receive the weapons they need to survive alien invasions. Their diligence in cross-checking shipping schedules can determine the arrival of reinforcements in time to save an entire planetary population from extinction. The knowledge that such consequences hinge on their accuracy creates a psychological climate unlike any found elsewhere in the Imperium. Every Terran citizen carries the awareness that their personal competence has galactic implications, that a single mistake may doom millions they will never see. This understanding elevates even the humblest bureaucratic duty into an act of life and death significance. Filing a document correctly becomes an offering to the Emperor, a service rendered to all humanity. Errors in data handling carry not only administrative penalties, but the spiritual taint of heresy. Despite this crushing burden, the citizens of Terra endure. They develop mental disciplines that allow them to function under pressures that would drive others into madness. Through meditation and ritual, repetitive tasks are transformed into prayers, each carefully executed procedure a mantra affirming devotion. They form support networks that share emotional strain without compromising efficiency, distributing the psychic weight of galactic responsibility among millions of souls who alone can truly comprehend Terran existence. Terra's education system reflects the world's role as the Imperium's administrative heart. Children begin formal training as soon as they demonstrate basic literacy, entering institutions designed not to produce well-rounded individuals, but to refine specialized components for the greater machine. They are tested incessantly, not just for scholastic achievement, but for psychological traits that will dictate their eventual position in the hierarchy. Those with exceptional memories are sent into archival disciplines, learning to store and recall staggering volumes of information with flawless precision. Children who excel at recognizing patterns are streamed into analytical programs that prepare them for data correlation and trend prediction roles. Students displaying meticulous linguistic skills are trained in legal documentation and regulatory interpretation. Every pathway is calibrated to align human potential with specific bureaucratic needs, shaping citizens whose abilities are tailored not to personal dreams, but to administrative necessity. Yet even here, Terra's schools preserve traditions that tie their students to the deeper heritage of mankind. Alongside technical training, they teach history and philosophy that lend meaning to their future tasks. Pupils study the foundational texts of imperial law, not merely as procedural directives, but as manifestations of humanity's highest aspirations codified into rule. They memorize passages from the writings of the Primarchs, not solely as doctrine, but as literature connecting them to legendary figures whose deeds transcend the narrow confines of office and ledger. The religious life of Terra is the final refinement of the imperial cult, shaped by 10 millennia of theological development and by the singular fact that this is humanity's cradle and the emperor's seat. Every citizen participates in daily devotions that are at once personal expressions of faith and contributions to world-spanning rituals that uphold the Golden Throne. Their prayers, synchronized with those of billions of other souls, create psychic patterns that sustain the emperor in ways no layman can fully grasp. The great cathedrals, focal points of Terran worship, rival the imperial palace itself in ambition. Hewn from single titanic blocks of stone quarried from the planet's deepest strata, these towers rise through multiple atmospheric layers to heights where the air thins and the distant glow of the Golden Throne can be glimpsed with the naked eye. Within, ceremonies weave together elements from every human culture that has ever existed, forming liturgies of such complexity and beauty that participation is the highest honor an ordinary citizen can attain. Yet the most profound devotions on Terra rarely occur in these grand spaces. They unfold instead in cramped hab chambers, in tiny personal shrines barely large enough for a kneeling figure. There, citizens who spend their waking hours parsing data and stamping forms rediscover meaning in whispered prayers. In these private rituals, the mechanical motions of their labor are transfigured into acts of worship, their personal struggles woven into the larger, unseen war for humanity's survival. Even the medical system on Terra has evolved in response to conditions that exist nowhere else in the galaxy, shaped to mend bodies and minds strained by the unique pressures of life on the Imperium's most vital and most burdened world. The crushing population density and carefully managed atmosphere of Terra constantly generate new ways for disease to spread. At the same time, the psychological pressure of endless bureaucratic labor produces forms of mental illness found almost nowhere else in the Imperium. Terran medici have therefore developed an approach that treats not only the body, but also the soul worn down by a lifetime spent as a cog in an administrative engine. Hospitals on Terra are as much sanctuaries as they are clinics. They function as temples where physical treatment is inseparable from spiritual guidance, helping patients understand their sickness as part of their service to the Emperor. Treatment regimens combine pharmaceuticals, surgery, augmetics, and therapies with confession, catechism, and doctrinal counseling. Health on Terra is recognized as a balance between biological function and the psychological ability to endure a life of total subordination to bureaucratic necessity. The most respected healers are those who can mend flesh while also healing the spiritual wounds inflicted by the demands of planetary service. The transport networks that move people and material across Terra are engineering answers to logistical problems that exist nowhere else. The number of human beings that must be shifted every hour demands systems of breathtaking complexity, vast meshes of routes and schedules that must coordinate the motion of billions while preserving the efficiency on which planetary survival depends. Gigantic atmospheric railways and pressure-sealed transit lines connect level to level in the world city. Their schedules are calculated to the second, synchronized with work shifts, ration distribution, and religious observances so that no citizen wastes time in transit. Yet these same systems also form one of the few genuine social spaces on Terra. Within the humming tunnels of the transport lines, strict hierarchies momentarily soften. Clerks, scribes, nobles, tech adepts, and laborers may find themselves riding in the same carriage, sharing a brief interval of movement through the vertical depths of their world. In those fleeting moments between duties, small conversations and silent shared glances cut across administrative boundaries, offering flashes of human connection that ease the strain of bureaucratic existence. Food production and distribution on Terra has reached a level of sophistication that borders on the miraculous. The planet consumes nutrients drawn from countless star systems, funneled into immense processing complexes that break raw materials down and recombine them into precisely formulated rations. These networks ensure that every citizen receives the exact caloric and nutritional profile required for maximum performance in their assigned role. The colossal processing engines that turn imports into consumable food operate at efficiencies that approach theoretical perfection, converting matter into carefully optimized sustenance while wasting almost nothing. Despite the utilitarian logic behind it, Terran cuisine has developed its own character. Flavor enhancers derived from atmospheric filtration residues and industrial byproducts impart distinctive tastes that citizens come to associate with home. Preparation methods designed to minimize cooking time and energy expenditure have, over the millennia, solidified into recognizable culinary traditions. In a world where personal life is tightly controlled, the simple act of sharing a meal becomes a cultural ritual, one of the few remaining ways to reinforce social bonds and maintain a sense of humanity within the grinding demands of collective efficiency. The waste handling systems that process the refuse of 1 trillion lives are achievements on par with Terra's greatest cathedrals and spires. Every byproduct, human waste, industrial sludge, broken machinery, worn-out cogitators, even obsolete data media, is fed into layered recycling complexes. There, it is broken down, sorted, and reconstituted as raw material for new food, new hab structures, new clothing, new machines. These processes function with such ruthless thoroughness that Terra operates as a nearly closed loop, minimizing its dependence on external resources while preserving the minimum standard of living required for the bureaucracy to function. The technologies that allow Terra to exist at all operate at scales and levels of complexity that defy common understanding. Atmospheric processors the size of continents maintain air quality for specific demographics, tuning oxygen levels, humidity, and trace gases for precise population clusters according to schedules calculated by cogitators, whose memory vaults contain more data than entire planetary archives. Power generation draws on geothermal furnaces drilled into the planet's mantle, on titanic fusion reactors, and on orbital solar arrays that never see night, together producing the energy required to keep artificial daylight burning for multitudes who have never witnessed a natural sunrise. Water purification and distribution systems endlessly cycle the same finite supply of liquid across the world. Every droplet consumed by a Terran citizen has traveled the planet innumerable times, through bodies, pipes, filters, and reclamation tanks. The recycling is so complete that molecules drunk by the Emperor during the Unification Wars may, in altered forms, still circulate in the daily rations of modern citizens. In this way, The most basic act of drinking water becomes an invisible thread binding the present to the deepest roots of Imperial history. Yet the most striking quality of Terran technology is not its grandeur, but its invisibility. For the average citizen, the machinery that sustains their existence fades into the background like weather once did on more natural worlds. Systems governing air, waste, food, and transport operate so smoothly that they are experienced not as miracles of engineering, but as simple facts of life. This transparency allows Terrans to devote their full attention to the administrative labor that defines their purpose, rather than to the infrastructure that permits them to perform it. The communication networks that lace Terra into the wider galaxy form the nervous system of Imperial civilization. Deep within fortress-like installations, astropathic choirs maintain a constant barrage of telepathic signals, their minds shielded by layers of psychic and physical wards. Through their efforts flow the messages that determine the fate of entire sectors. Deployment orders for guard regiments, resource allocations for besieged worlds, responses to Xenos incursions, and decrees of Imperial policy. This endless stream of information shapes not only the decisions of lords and generals, but the daily routines of clerks and functionaries. In countless data vaults and processing halls, Terran workers handle reports from war zones they will never see, requisitions from colonies they cannot imagine, and administrative updates from planetary rulers whose names they will never hear spoken aloud. The sheer scale of this information, its reach across thousands of light-years, creates a mindset in which individual planets and even whole subsectors blur into a single abstract pattern of needs and priorities. For many Terrans, the galaxy is less a map of stars than a shifting matrix of data loads, urgency codes, and clearance levels. Maintaining order in such an environment requires a form of policing unlike any found on ordinary worlds. The Adeptus Arbits enforce Imperial law on Terra, not primarily through visible patrols or constant personal surveillance, but through administrative mechanisms that make deviation from accepted norms extraordinarily difficult. Life is structured so that compliance with regulations is simply the easiest, most efficient path, while any attempt to deviate demands effort, time, and resources beyond the reach of most citizens. When direct enforcement is required, however, it is swift and absolute. Those who violate procedure or challenge established order are fed into judicial systems that function like machines. Their cases are assessed by clerks and logicians consulting databanks of precedent and algorithmic interpretations of law. Outcomes are determined less by personal testimony than by statistical models and codified necessity. Justice on Terra is fast, predictable, and almost entirely impersonal, an expression of a society where individual circumstances matter less than the smooth function of the whole. Terra's military garrison is not primarily intended to repel external invasions. The Imperial Palace and the greater Sol system are defended by forces on a scale beyond comprehension, but to serve as a living symbol. The regiments chosen to be stationed on humanity's birth world are drawn from among the Imperium's most decorated and reliable units, veterans whose loyalty and skill have been proven on dozens of battlefields. Their very presence is a reminder to every citizen that their bureaucratic labor underpins real wars, real blood, and real sacrifice at the edge of human space. These soldiers, despite their elite assignments, live within the same frameworks as everyone else. Their barracks are tied into the same air cycling and recycling systems as surrounding hab blocks. Their rations pass through the same distribution channels that feed clerks and scribes. Their training cycles and patrol duties are synchronized with planetary administrative periods. They embody the ultimate form of Imperial discipline. Individuals whose entire identity has fused with their function as instruments of the Emperor's will. The culture that emerges from all this is unlike any other in the galaxy. Terran music incorporates the deep thunder of atmosphere processors, the hiss of pressure seals, and the rhythmic clatter of data slates into its compositions, transforming the world's mechanical breathing into art. Terran literature finds lyricism in the cold precision of legal code and archival language, producing poetry that exalts correct procedure and flawless documentation as if they were holy rites. Visual artists repurposed industrial cast-offs, worn circuit boards, broken cogwheels, scrap plasteel into icons and reliefs that invite contemplation of the systems that keep the planet alive. Yet Terra's greatest cultural achievement is not found in any painting, symphony, or text. It lies in the social conventions that allow billions to live pressed together without tearing each other apart. Terran citizens have developed intricate codes of courtesy, ways to move, speak, and even look at one another that reduce friction in overcrowded spaces. They build informal networks of mutual aid that offer emotional support without impeding work schedules. They maintain family and local traditions that preserve fragments of personal heritage, while simultaneously participating in immense world-scale rituals that fold each individual into the collective identity of humanity. Economically, Terra exists outside normal categories. The planet produces almost no physical goods of its own. Instead, it consumes staggering quantities of resources shipped from across the Imperium. Its value lies in its function as the central processor of civilization. The place where information converges is sorted, interpreted, and translated into instructions that shape the fates of uncounted worlds. Terrans do not participate in this system as workers seeking riches or personal advancement, but as indispensable components of an information engine whose output is orders, policies, and decisions. Their labor is valuable not because it creates tangible products, but because it keeps the Imperium's vast machinery from seizing up. In return, they receive little in the way of personal wealth. Their true compensation is ideological, the knowledge that their efforts contribute directly to humanity's survival. For many citizens, this sense of purpose, this assurance that their monotonous work matters on a cosmic scale, is worth more than any material reward they could hope to earn. The environment in which they live is entirely artificial, yet finely tuned to human needs. The atmosphere is maintained at chemical balances, calculated to support both physical health and psychological stability, as well as the proper operation of delicate machinery. Temperature and humidity follow patterns dictated by administrative necessity rather than any planetary season, rising and falling to keep productivity at optimal levels. Even the electromagnetic conditions of the world are regulated, with radiation levels and background signals managed to sustain both human nervous systems and massive data infrastructures. Within this engineered world, Terrans form deep emotional bonds to their surroundings. They learn to read meaning into the way light filters through smog layers, to find beauty in the clean lines of ventilation grills and data tower silhouettes. They draw spiritual comfort from the predictable cycles of artificial day and night, atmosphere pulses, and transport schedules, systems that, though entirely manufactured, become as beloved to them as forests and seas are to the inhabitants of more natural planets. Their devotion to Terra is no less sincere for being directed at a machine-made environment. Over generations, humans on Terra have developed mental traits that hint at the species' possible future. Citizens routinely exhibit attention spans and memory capacities honed by a lifetime in data-rich surroundings. They possess emotional resilience that allows them to keep functioning despite pressures that would break most off-worlders. They learn to navigate complex social webs embedded within rigid bureaucratic structures, maintaining genuine personal relationships even where every interaction is constrained by protocol. These adaptations, however, exact a steep price. Terrans surrender spontaneity in exchange for predictability, personal choice for collective efficiency, and much of their individual expression for social stability. Their lives follow paths laid out by administrative forecast rather than dream or desire. Yet in return, they gain a sense of security and purpose unknown on most frontier or backwater worlds. a certainty about their role in the galaxy that can sustain them even in the darkest times. Terra's religious importance extends far beyond its status as the seat of government. It is the holiest of human worlds, where the Emperor's presence is felt most strongly, and where the rituals of the imperial cult reach their most elaborate and refined forms. Every prayer whispered on Terra is believed to carry extra weight by virtue of its nearness to the Golden Throne. Every devotional act gains additional significance simply because it is performed on humanity's cradle. This spiritual gravity influences every aspect of daily life. For many citizens, bureaucratic labor is not merely a civic duty, but a form of liturgy. Diligent attention to detail becomes an offering to the Emperor. Accurate filing and flawless transcription are experienced as acts of faith. Participation in the systems that keep Terra functioning is a kind of ongoing mass, and the constant willingness to subsume personal wants into the needs of the whole is seen as the highest expression of devotion. The future of Terra is as precarious as that of the Imperium itself. The planet's continued existence depends on systems and technologies that require unending maintenance and, at times, something perilously close to miracles. The population continues to swell despite the apparent impossibility of sustaining more bodies. New techniques in resource management, architecture, and social engineering are constantly needed to stretch the limits of what is feasible. Each century brings fresh challenges, and each century Terrans must adapt again. Yet the citizens of Terra face this uncertainty with the same grim resolve that has seen their world through 10,000 years of crisis. They rise each day, perform their tasks, and keep the planetary engine running for one more cycle. Every day that Terra continues to function is a small victory over entropy, a demonstration that human will can bend even the coldest mathematics of scarcity and overcrowding to its purpose. Parents raise their children not to inherit luxury or peace, but to take their place in the planet-spanning apparatus that keeps humanity alive. Terra's true legacy is not found in any single building or relic, but in what it proves about the human species. It stands as evidence that mankind can adapt to environments that should be utterly uninhabitable, can devise solutions to problems that brush against the absolute limits of possibility, and can sustain vast, complex civilizations long after any rational calculation says they should have collapsed. Every citizen who endures a lifetime in this world city is a living testament to the power of human determination spread out over geological epochs. In the end, Terra is both humanity's greatest triumph and its deepest sacrifice. It shows what can be achieved when billions of people devote themselves wholly to a purpose greater than themselves, and also what is lost when lives are reduced to functions within an incomprehensibly large machine. Each breath drawn beneath Terra's artificial sky carries the weight of that choice. Each day the planet endures is another hard-won step in humanity's unending struggle against decay, chaos, and extinction. The citizens who call Terra home live as both beneficiaries and victims of humanity's greatest accomplishment. Their lives are sustained by systems that embody the peak of human achievement and the deepest expression of human tragedy. The pilgrimage routes that twist through Terra's vertical immensity tell stories that no official archive will ever record. In the vast atmospheric shafts that link the high surface levels to the deepest foundations, travelers pass ancient shrines that predate the Imperium itself. These sanctuaries are tended by custodians whose altered physiologies mark them as descendants of the first Terran engineers. Their bodies, shaped across millennia to endure the toxic air of the deep strata, carry a heritage older than the imperial palace. In hushed voices, they speak of the time before the atmospheric processes, when Terra's sky was blue, its clouds natural, and its rivers ran clear with water that had never cycled through human veins. Through oral traditions preserved in the gaps between official records, they pass down memories of a world that no longer exists. They remember when the first great spires were raised not as monuments to administrative efficiency, but as frantic attempts to shelter populations fleeing a poisoned surface. They remember the activation of the first atmosphere engines, the moment when Terra's wild weather was surrendered to regulated climate control so that billions, and later trillions, might live. They remember the day the last natural bird died, its final song drowned forever beneath the mechanical pulse of planetary machinery. These deep custodians do more than tend old shrines. They operate monitoring systems that track atmospheric composition in zones too hostile for ordinary citizens to enter, maintaining the fragile balance of pressure and gas content that keeps the upper hive habitable. Their duties take them into regions where the line between Terra's buried crust and its artificial superstructure has dissolved into hybrid forms that exist nowhere else in the galaxy. Places where machinery has grown into stone and strata of rock have been reshaped by industrial flow into almost organic patterns. The sounds reported from these depths hint that Terra's transformation into humanity's administrative heart may have awakened something that once slept far below. Deep resonances, conforming to no known engineering pattern, generate harmonics that disrupt communications and induce disturbing psychological effects in those who listen too closely. Official reports dismiss them as acoustic artifacts created by atmosphere processes interacting with complex geology. The custodians of the deep do not argue with these explanations, but they refuse to speak of what they believe those sounds truly mean. The atmospheric processing stations that govern Terra's artificial climate operate on schedules that incorporate variables no citizen is allowed to understand. The titanic engines that manufacture breathable air draw power from sources older than Imperial records, their energy demands rising and falling according to rhythms that suggest influences beyond simple chemical regulation. Tech priests assigned to these facilities report phenomena that defy orthodox principles of mechanics and logic. Instances where the machines behave as if obeying rules that were never part of their original design. The air itself begins to act as a carrier for something more than oxygen and trace gases. Reports spread, quietly, of shared dreams among clerks and scribes, dreams filled with bureaucratic data they have never encountered while awake. Administrators, processing requisitions for distant worlds, suddenly find they possess detailed knowledge of planets they have never studied. Knowledge that proves accurate when checked against sealed files. Ecclesiarchy investigators classify these events as minor psychic anomalies, but taken together, they suggest that Terra's atmosphere has become a medium for a kind of consciousness that exceeds the bounds of any single human mind. The recycling systems that convert human waste back into the raw essentials of life function with an efficiency so total it verges on the supernatural. Yet the tech priests who maintain them report anomalies that strain the limits of material science. Organic refuse emerging from the deepest processing stages sometimes carries chemical profiles that should be impossible, or molecular structures that have never been catalogued in any Imperial archive. Complex arrangements that then pass discreetly into food, clothing, construction materials. These waste complexes also serve as thresholds to regions of Terra that appear on no sanctioned map. Beyond their lowest galleries lie vast zones where the original surface has been ground, fused, and reformed by 10,000 years of industrial digestion into landscapes that resist any straightforward description. Maintenance crews sent into these zones bring back accounts of rock formations that appear to rearrange themselves over time, as though obeying some hidden algorithm or intention. They describe cavern networks whose unusual acoustics can induce visions in those who linger to listen, and underground rivers whose waters contain dissolved substances that have no plausible origin in Terra's known geology. Within these hidden depths, entirely sealed-off ecosystems have arisen, fed not by sunlight, but by the constant rain of industrial byproduct. Life here has adapted to survive on what humanity discards. The organisms that populate these environments exhibit unsettling traits, reaction patterns and social behaviors that mirror human administrative structures. They organize themselves into layered hierarchies that collect, sort, and redistribute resources with an efficiency that eerily parallels the Imperium's own bureaucratic methods. The Golden Throne's influence extends into these deep ecosystems in ways that surpass its role as the psychic beacon of the Imperium. The Emperor's sustained existence generates currents of psychic force that seep through Terra's crust, warping the properties of matter and energy far below. Investigators documenting these effects encounter anomalies that undermine basic assumptions about physics, phenomena implying that the barrier between material reality and the immaterium has grown thin and unstable in Terra's bones. Those who maintain Terra's sprawling bureaucracy go about their work immersed in these overlapping fields of influence, unaware of how deeply they shape their lives. Their precise, ritualized labors do more than push data and update ledgers. Every file handled, every code logged, every decision ratified contributes to patterns of activity that echo the psychic rhythms radiating from the Golden Throne. Together, these patterns form resonances that reinforce the barrier between Terra and the tides of the warp, pressing constantly against reality. This protection is purchased at a cost no citizen is allowed to fully grasp. The psychological strain required to maintain absolute administrative discipline slowly reshapes human minds, pushing them toward the edge of what can still be called human. Citizens who serve long terms in the most critical hubs of administration begin to show cognitive capacities beyond baseline norms, abilities that suggest their consciousness has been altered by prolonged exposure to the throne's psychic field. Those identified by deep psychological screenings as having undergone such changes are quietly transferred to specialized roles. They become living interfaces between human bureaucracy and the immense cogitator complexes that process galactic data. Their altered minds can follow data flows and multi-dimensional correlations that would annihilate unmodified consciousness. Their existence, their gradual loss of ordinary inner life, is never publicly acknowledged. Their sacrifice is the hidden price of Terra's continued function. The transport networks that carry citizens through Terra's atmospheric strata serve as channels for influences that go far beyond simple mechanics. Passengers report experiences during transit that hint at exposure to the planet's psychic undercurrents. Shared visions with strangers, flashes of collective memory, dreams that later prove prophetic. Journeys through the great atmospheric shafts sometimes leave travelers with images and impressions that linger for years. These effects intensify along the deepest routes, where crushing pressure and psychic saturation push the limits of human tolerance. Citizens descending into the lowest tiers of Terra's bureaucracy speak of encounters with aspects of themselves that seem to exist outside their bodies, manifestations of accumulated psychological strain given form by the environment. In such places, the boundary between individual and collective psyche becomes uncertain, as if millennia of administrative thought have pooled and begun to take on a kind of autonomous presence. The major administrative centers generate psychic fields of their own. Workers within these complexes often report extraordinary mental states, crystalline clarity, the ability to process data at impossible speeds, and memories so precise they approach perfect recall. These conditions dramatically enhance efficiency, but they also erode something crucial. Those who reach the highest levels of administrative performance describe a gradual fading of personal desires, a slow replacement of individual will with a sense of impersonal, collective purpose. Their consciousness continues to function, but their sense of self recedes, leaving a kind of waking sleep in which thought serves bureaucracy alone. The atmospheric processes that sustain Terra's artificial environment operate according to cycles that now respond not only to chemical and thermal parameters, but to psychic pressure generated by the population. Their functioning subtly adjusts to preserve not just physical viability, but psychological balance under impossible crowding. The air itself has become a carrier of collective thought. Every breath taken brings with it faint psychic impressions, shared fragments of consciousness diffused through the atmosphere. These influences appear in the form of shared dreams filled with bureaucratic information. Spontaneous awareness of events in distant districts, and intuitive grasp of procedures never formally taught. Individual minds become permeable, open to currents of a planetary-scale awareness. Terra's citizens are still separate persons, but each mind increasingly behaves like one node in a larger cognitive network. The systems that feed Terra reinforce this transformation. Analyses of standard ration blocks reveal compounds that do more than sustain metabolism. They influence neurotransmitter balances, nudge emotional responses, and stabilize cognitive patterns in ways finely tuned to bureaucratic needs. The rations sharpen focus, reduce disruptive impulses, and blunt desires that might interfere with duty. Citizens ingest these substances every day, unaware that their brain chemistry is being continuously tuned in favor of collective function. The water that flows through Terra's pipes carries its own legacy. Over ages of cycling through the planet's industrial strata, it has picked up trace minerals from artificial geological layers, minerals whose properties have been subtly changed by prolonged exposure to the Emperor's psychic presence and the dream pressure of 1 trillion minds. Accumulated over generations in human tissues, these substances contribute to physiological and neurological shifts that favor the kinds of thought and perception Terra demands. Religious practice on Terra also serves a deeper purpose than doctrinal instruction or comfort. Daily devotions, massed litanies, and private prayers generate enormous psychic currents. These resonances reinforce the weakened barrier between material space and the warp, stabilizing reality in regions where it might otherwise unravel. The faith of Terra's citizens protects not only their souls, but the very fabric of existence around them, though this too has a cost. The psychic energy channeled through them shears away at subtle aspects of their inner lives, leaving behind beings who are physically human, yet increasingly distant from the emotional and spiritual textures that once defined humanity. Terrans live out their lives unaware that their minds have been transformed to serve these vast, invisible functions. From birth to death, they remain convinced they are simply diligent citizens performing necessary tasks, even as their inner worlds are hollowed and reshaped around imperatives they never consciously chose. The monitoring systems that track efficiency and stability across Terra's administrative web periodically flag anomalies that point to a more unsettling truth. The planet's transformation has pushed far past the limits any rational model can account for. Population density has long exceeded what should be sustainable, yet Terra continues to absorb more people. Resources arrive from sources no shipping log records. Atmospheric processors maintain outputs beyond rated capacity. Waste never accumulates to the catastrophic levels mathematics predicts. Taken together, these impossibilities imply that Terra's survival depends on factors beyond engineering, forces and interventions that cannot be explained by conventional science. The planet persists through the aid of influences that no one is allowed to name, let alone investigate fully. Every successful cycle of planetary operation is not merely a triumph of human determination, but an unseen transaction with entities whose nature and motives lie outside human comprehension. The deepest monitoring stations, planted in seemingly unreachable layers of Terra's structure, return data suggesting that reality itself is being modified within the planet's sphere of influence. Measurements of gravity imply a total mass greater than Terra's physical structure can account for. Electromagnetic readings reveal energy signatures that obey no known rules. Atmospheric samples contain elements that should not be stable or even possible under any familiar conditions. These distortions are strongest in regions of extreme population density, indicating that human consciousness has become an active component in Terra's continued existence. The combined psychic output of 1 trillion souls appears to be rewriting the laws of physics within the planet's domain. The citizens live and work immersed in these fields, sustained by them even as they are quietly changed by them. The atmospheric engines now breathe in patterns that no longer match their original programming. Their cycles align increasingly with emergent rhythms traced from the collective mental activity of the population. The machines have become something more than machines, their operation interwoven with the psychic signatures of those they serve, until technology and consciousness can no longer be cleanly separated. In the deepest buried strata, where Terra's ancient surface lies entombed under mountains of construction, sensors have begun to detect sounds emanating from depths that should be solid rock. These echoes suggest the presence of spaces that simply cannot exist according to ordinary geometry. Caverns opening into directions other than up or down, passages carved through something more abstract than stone. The noises rising from these impossible hollows carry patterns that seep into the dreams of citizens across the hive world, bringing messages from sources outside material reality. Still, Terra turns beneath its manufactured sky, rotating as it has since it first condensed from stellar dust billions of years ago. On the surface, its cycle seems unchanged, but within that familiar motion, subtle shifts are accumulating. Atmospheric readings hint at fundamental alterations in the planet's nature. Demographic data imply population dynamics that transcend biological possibility. Administrative reports quietly catalog events and behaviors that break every assumption about how human beings can live and think. The people of Terra continue their routines unaware that each completed shift carries them closer to a threshold beyond which humanity will mean something entirely different. They file documents, attend rituals, and maintain the engines of bureaucracy, while something vast and patient grows in the depths below them, something nourished by their dreams and built upon their unknowing sacrifices. The atmosphere processes continue their endless breathing, but their rhythm grows more intricate with each cycle, layering in new harmonics that hint at purposes larger than simply maintaining air. The great machines have begun to dream, and in those dreams, they process information from outside time and space, preparing for changes that will remake not only Terra, but the very nature of human civilization.